24%. That is the value erased from a technology company, not in a month, not in a week, but in the hours following its own victory announcement. The company was Cloudflare. It had just posted quarterly revenue of $639.8 million, a 34% jump year over year. On paper, the kind of quarter most CEOs rehearse toasts for. But the market wasn't reacting to the numbers. It was reacting to a single paragraph buried in the report. A plan to eliminate 1,100 employees, 20% of the global workforce. The restructuring alone was projected to cost between $140 million and $150 million. And the official justification wasn't failure. It was progress. Cloudflare cited a 600% surge in its own internal AI usage over just 3 months, declaring the dawn of a new agentic AI era. The layoffs were framed not as retreat, but as acceleration. So here is the fracture. A company reports record revenue growth. Same day, same announcement. It tells a fifth of its people they no longer fit the future. The earnings beat expectations. The stock collapsed anyway, as if Wall Street heard the words but felt the tremor underneath them. Operational strength read as profound instability. Growth mistaken for, or maybe correctly identified as, fragility wearing a different mask. The numbers were strong. The technology was working. CEO Matthew Prince and co-founder Michelle Zatlyn stood behind the decision personally. So how did a story of AI-driven efficiency trigger financial panic? And what does it reveal about a new species of corporate risk? One where winning and losing happen in the same breath. Before the crisis, Cloudflare was not a company in distress. It was the opposite, a fundamental utility of the digital world, as essential as the physical infrastructure beneath the streets. Its financial reports were not just strong, they were a testament to meticulous execution and market dominance. Revenue consistently climbed, posting 34% growth year over year, a pace that defied its already significant scale. This was not growth fueled by unsustainable spending. The company generated $84.1 million in free cash flow in the first quarter alone. The balance sheet was a war chest, holding over $4 billion in cash and securities. For investors, this data formed an unassailable narrative. The company's future revenue streams were already secured, with over $2.5 billion in remaining performance obligations, contractual promises of future business. This was the mark of a mature, resilient enterprise, a core holding for any portfolio betting on the long-term expansion of the internet itself. The market consensus was clear. Cloudflare was an operational fortress, engineered to withstand economic turbulence and competitive pressure. But the greatest threats to a fortress rarely come from the outside. Inside its walls, a new philosophy was gathering momentum, one that would test the very foundations the fortress was built upon. The change began not with a market downturn, but with an internal explosion. In the span of a single quarter, the use of artificial intelligence tools inside Cloudflare accelerated by an astonishing 600%. This was not a gradual adoption. It was a corporate directive taking hold with startling velocity. What began as an experiment in individual productivity rapidly became an organizational obsession, a core component of daily operations that permeated every department. The initial results were compelling, suggesting a powerful new formula. AI could fundamentally re-engineer the company from the inside out, unlocking unprecedented levels of output. The machine was learning, and it was learning fast. But as the data flowed in, the definition of efficiency was quietly being rewritten. Leadership began articulating a new vision, one that moved beyond simple augmentation. The goal was no longer just to give employees better tools to do their jobs. The goal was to build an agentic, AI-first operating model. This shift in language was critical. An agent is not a passive tool. It is an autonomous actor capable of executing complex tasks. The new strategy was not about making a process faster. It was about making entire workflows, especially in back-office and administrative functions, fully autonomous, and by extension, rendering the human roles within them obsolete. The company believed it had discovered the blueprint for the future of work. But in their haste to build it, they overlooked a critical fragility in their own system. On the first quarter earnings call, Cloudflare tried to tell two stories at once. The first was triumph. Revenue hit $639.8 million, beating Wall Street expectations. Guidance for Q2 pointed to $664 million to $665 million. Continued acceleration. By every conventional measure, the company was winning. Then came the second story. In the same breath, leadership announced the termination of 1,100 employees. 20% of the workforce. Gone. The projected restructuring cost? Up to $150 million. It was the corporate equivalent of popping champagne at a funeral. The market didn't see a coherent strategy. It saw a contradiction. If the business was this healthy, revenue surging, guidance strong, why gut a fifth of the company? And if the restructuring was this necessary, what did that say about the health the numbers supposedly proved? The two narratives didn't complement each other. They devoured each other. Investors are trained to detect instability, and what they detected here was a disconnect between the CEO's vision and the reality he was describing. The carefully constructed message that AI-driven efficiency demanded a leaner organization never landed. It was overwritten by a simpler, more alarming signal. A company inflicting a massive wound on itself while insisting it had never felt better. The audience wasn't watching a transformation. They were watching a company lose control of its own story. The consequences of that perception gap wouldn't be measured in future productivity gains. They would arrive immediately, and they would be brutal. The damage was immediate, measurable, and irreversible in the short term. A 24% stock decline translated into billions of dollars of market capitalization erased within hours. But the deeper accounting extended far beyond the share price. The restructuring plan carried an estimated cost of between $140 million and $150 million, structured as approximately $105 million to $110 million in cash charges, with an additional $35 million to $40 million in non-cash obligations. The company was paying a steep and deliberate price to dismantle its own workforce architecture. Then there was the margin story, the signal embedded in the financial statements before the layoff news even landed. GAAP gross margins had already contracted from 75.9% to 71.2% year over year. That compression was not caused by the restructuring. It preceded it. The foundation was already shifting beneath the company's feet, even as leadership declared confidence in its trajectory. And beneath every figure sat a human reality no spreadsheet fully captures. 1,100 individuals were notified that their roles had been rendered unnecessary. Not by performance failure, not by business decline, but by the architecture of the new system itself. The company's quarterly net loss stood at $22.9 million, a number modest against the scale of the enterprise, yet a loss in a quarter loudly declared as proof of strength. The damage was quantifiable. The scrutiny that followed was not. Cloudflare now faced a question investors were asking across the entire technology sector. Was this a calculated sacrifice, or the first fracture of a structural fault running far deeper? The execution blindspot was not a failure of technology. It was a failure of narrative. Cloudflare operated under a core and ultimately flawed assumption that a story of overwhelming technological strength would land as pure upside. They presented a future of AI-driven efficiency backed by strong revenue guidance and positive non-GAAP income. But investors do not price theoretical future gains when they're staring at the certain immediate cost of disruption, up to $150 million in restructuring charges and 1,100 jobs eliminated in a single stroke. Record performance and mass layoffs announced in the same breath created a narrative vacuum. The market filled that void not with confidence, but with fear. This exposes what may become a new law of corporate physics for the AI era: narrative market fit. A company's strategic story must align with how capital markets fundamentally price risk. Cloudflare told an innovation story. The market heard a volatility story. A management team willing to destabilize its own successful operation for a model that doesn't yet exist at scale. The 24% stock collapse was the verdict. Swift, brutal, unanimous. No appeal filed. The lesson cuts deep. In a period of radical technological change, communicating stability and predictable execution is every bit as critical as demonstrating innovation. You cannot sprint toward the future while asking investors to ignore the wreckage in the rearview mirror. Not when the wreckage is 1,100 people and 9 figures in severance costs. As artificial intelligence grows more capable, Cloudflare's collapse in market confidence poses the defining question for the next decade of business, and perhaps for yours. When the machine that builds your company also gives you the power to dismantle it, how do you prove to the people watching that you're still in control?